This is a review of the IPS i5, the ultra-light and ultra-compact electric unicycle. Now, a bit of context for the review, just so you know where I'm coming in from. I would call myself a transportation sports enthusiast, so anything that gets me from point A to point B in an interesting way, I'm all for it. So, kick scooter, this is where it all started. Bicycling, this is my awesome Daehong folder. And scooter, on a larger scale. And in a city where owning a car really isn't very practical and where the public transit is often temperamental at best, finding a good alternative transportation can be a godsend. The IPS i5 is a slightly unusual choice. So looking at the comparison chart from eWheels, which is where I actually got my scooter from, it is not the cheapest scooter there is, and on the scale of all the sort of beginner-friendly below $1,000 scooters, it is pretty low on the power scale. As a matter of fact, if you were to spend just $200 more and spring for the King song, you get quite a bit more power, twice as much, and almost twice as much range. And you get a much larger battery, as well as all the fun stuff that you don't get from the IPS. So, why did I choose the i5, and am I happy with the choice? Well, that's what this video is for. But before I get into it, understand that I'm very much reviewing this EUC as a complete beginner. So please pardon whatever mistake I am about to make, and I'll be happy to hear whatever feedback anyone have in the comments section below, either good or bad. So I took some notes and consolidated my thoughts into a list of 5 criteria. Nothing like a good list, as they would say. Criteria 1. Speed, or the lack thereof. Now this might be a bit strange to you hardcore e-unicyclists, but I wanted one that does not go too fast. Now I have done some risky things in the past, and one thing I do know is that if you give me the capacity for powers and speed, I will push for the limit and get myself into a whole lot of trouble. And in addition, I do live in New York City, and not to reinforce negative stereotyping, you know how New York drivers can be. So the i5 tops out at 14.2 miles an hour, but what does that really translate to? Honestly, I had no idea what that number really means when I was initially researching this scooter. Now, if you're wondering about that same thing, here's what they actually equates to. It is faster than a pair of running nuns on Fifth Avenue. And it is faster than a leisurely jogging guy on the sidewalk getting his exercise. It is also faster than a guy struggling to pedal his bike up the pretty steep Williamsburg Bridge, who was not very happy. But it is not quite as fast as a subway train, unfortunately. I'm not quite sure if that was perfectly helpful, but 14 miles an hour is basically someone running. Not jogging leisurely, and not sprinting all out, since you can actually probably run faster. You're also going about the same speed as someone slowly pedaling a bicycle, but in a crowded bike lane, you're really not making any friends. And in a car traffic, you're basically a speed bump, not a good idea. But this also means that at any point, you can just jump off and run to catch yourself. A very good thing if you're just starting. I have had to ditch on several occasions, and I have yet to actually take a fall, and it is largely because of this limitation. But in an end, being slow is not what I would call a feature, but rather a limitation. So yes, it does satisfy my criteria, but I don't think I'm really selling you on this either. So, on to the next criteria. Criteria 2. Something easy to live with. Well, I know it sounds a bit abstract. However, what I meant is something that fits into your daily routine without too much hassle, which is really a combination of things. something that isn't too heavy for you to carry when you aren't riding it. It also shouldn't be conspicuous so as to attract unwanted attention. Not just curiosity on the street, but I have heard stories of people being stopped from bringing their EUCs onto trains or buses, and I know there are buildings in New York City where they do not allow motorized vehicles of any kind inside. And this is where I think the i5 really shines. The i5 is probably one of, if not the most compact electric unicycle on the market. You can pretty easily fit it in any standard size shopping bag, as you can see here. This makes it easy to sling over your shoulder and great for grocery run and shopping while you're in the supermarket. And as a matter of fact, you can simply use the bag to carry the grocery home on the way back while riding the scooter. For work, I typically use the Chrome 28-liter backpack, and the i5 fits really easily into it also. And on a few occasions, when it rained while I was at work, I simply carried it home in my bag. At 17 pounds, it isn't exactly featherweight, but by comparison, the typical weight for an EUC such as the Kinsong 14D is easily twice as much. For size comparison, here is the Daehan folding bike that used to be my daily driver. Now, people are always amazed at how small the fold is on this bike, but by comparison to the i5, it is absolutely humongous. There are some prices you have to pay for this incredible thinness and lightness. The tire itself is only 1 3/4 inch wide, which means that it has a lot less contact surfaces with the ground, which translates to better maneuverability at the cost of lesser stability. This is also partially due to the lesser amount of gyroscopic forces generated at speed by the lighter wheel. So the max cruising speed, the i5 can feel a little bit squirrely, especially if you hit a bump or an uneven surface, which unfortunately New York City has plenty of. Just so you have some sense of the kind of condition I have to deal with on a regular basis, this is the bike lane on First Street, which is part of my usual commute route home. And it's been like this for as long as I have lived in the neighborhood, completely filled with random potholes and patches of unleveled asphalt and random junk. Now, as a motorcyclist and a bicyclist in the city, I'm sort of used to having to be constantly aware of the road surface condition wherever I go and basically expect the worst. This actually had been really helpful and translated well to my experience riding the i5. Now, the skinny tire on the i5 is actually quite similar to the smaller tire on a folding bike, so the issue technically exists there as well. But you really don't hear the Brompton fans complain about the lack of stability, do you? So overall, I am happy with the i5 in this regard. Now, there is an old saying in photography that the best camera is the one you got with you when that perfect photo moment strikes. Being lighter and smaller means that it is a lot easier to have the i5 with you, even if you aren't sure if you'll actually get to use it. And this is precisely why you are a lot more likely to have it with you when you actually need it. So yes, I think the i5 scored high marks for being easy to live with. There are a few minor complaints, such as the all too easy to trigger power button, which I had to fix by adding a bunch of rubber washer around it, and the lack of any sort of sensor that would power it off automatically when you're not riding it, such as when you're trying to lift it over a curb or what have you. Yes, having a bit more speed and range would be nice, but I am really unwilling to trade it against adding any additional bulk or weight to the scooter. For the speed and range it does have, I think it hits a pretty sweet spot on size and weight. Alright, I hate having to do this, but this is getting a bit long. In the interest of getting the video actually published, so I can move on to the next part, I'm going to split this review into two parts. For the criteria I mentioned in part 1, I mostly focus on the basic attribute of the scooter and how I felt about them. For part 2, I'm going to talk a little bit more about what is the combined effect of those attributes.
Now, finally, if you had actually made it this far, I do want to thank you again for watching. This is the very first review video I have ever made. I hope it was interesting and helpful. Now, from a fellow UC beginner to another, thank you and goodbye.